have for you today. The absolutely amazing Ethan Evans and the wonderful, wonderful Bärbel Wetenkamp. Welcome to both of you. I've been looking forward to this discussion.
Thank you so
Nice to
much,
be
Mark.
here.
Thank you. Ethan, usually we let the lady go first, but because the lady has already been with me in previous discussions, so I would ask you actually to start first. Will you kindly share with our colleagues, with our friends, with our people and our followers, your personal journey and how actually you have come to be who you are, especially talking please about your personal life, not Amazon and not career.
All right. I don't often get asked that question, so I'll make it up a little bit as I go. But the good news is it is my life, so supposedly I know it. Um, so I grew up on a small farm in the U.S. state of Ohio. I'm the youngest of four children. My parents were both very highly educated, and so the farm was not our primary source of income. My father had a PhD in chemistry, um, and many of the rest of my family are medical doctors. So I grew up around education, but out on a farm, kind of a unique background. And I'm the right age that computers started being available to people at home right as I was becoming a teenager. And so, uh, beyond doing things outside and liking to be outside, I discovered a love of computers and programming. We'll talk about career later, but that's what led me to engineering school and things like that. Um, Probably like many kids, by the time I was ready to go to university, I also wanted to get some distance away from home. So I actually wrote a letter to Apple Computer, and I asked them, "How do you, how do I get a job at Apple?" And they said, "Well, we hire from 5 universities," and they gave me a list. Three of those universities were in California, um, which was very far from me, like 2,000 miles, 3,000 kilometers. Um, One was only a shorter distance, Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh, so I went there. Um, and On a personal life, then I actually never ended up working at Apple. Um, I made friends in Pittsburgh. I worked at a series of startups there. What formed me in my personal life, I guess, I am more extroverted than many of my colleagues. So, in my first job, I worked as an engineer for only a few months before taking a leadership role. And within a year or so, I was managing people. Again, no career, not focusing on that. You'll see how hard that is for me. Um, but it put me on a different path. I moved around with different startups around the US. Um, I adopted a little girl with my first wife. We adopted a little girl from China. And so I started raising a family. Um, I moved to Seattle for Amazon. Talk about that later. Uh, Unfortunately, became divorced. Um, Took up a lot of outdoor activities in the mountains. So I split my time between doing outside stuff, which is a big part of my life. I get strength and relaxation from nature. Um, Got remarried. I'm married to my wife Audrey now. We were just, as you know, very near you skiing at Zermatt just a few weeks ago. And what else would I say? I guess if I'm sharing beyond my love of the outdoors, playing ice hockey, doing physical things, the personal piece of my journey is I just really love working on hard problems and answering questions. I have a good friend who he says, let's play the talking game. So people are like, what do you want to do? He wants to have an intimate conversation. And I really enjoy that. If there's an idea to be discussed, I don't really care about the field. I'm interested.
That's absolutely amazing. Thank you very much for sharing this. It's a wonderful story, and congratulations on your new marriage.
Thank you.
Bärbel, Please tell us who you are and how come you have become who you are today. And please tell us a bit about Claruna. I'm very excited to hear that.
Okay, thank you, Mark. It was such an impressive story to hear from Ethan. I'm still in the mountains behind Seattle. Um, I was born in Germany, in the northern part of Germany. Um, Grew up there and was interested in so many things that after school I had a hard time to decide into which direction, into which profession I would like to go. This went from law to business to arts to everything. So I was very interested, open minded. And more or less by accident, I ended up to start my business life as a journalist. And this was really a good accident. I really loved this. Helped me experience and learn a lot of things. And as you said, Ethan, me also, I wanted to get away, maybe less from home than, but from the city where I was. I wanted to go out into the world and went to Paris for a year, which was great, also great experience. I was naive enough to think that people would wait for a young German journalist over there with almost no French knowledge, um, which turned out very quickly not to be the case. And then they just brought a newspaper. So back then we still brought newspapers to find jobs. And I found a job at quite newly created Euro Disneyland over there and worked at the reception, because in the cascade of seasonal workers for Disney, if you speak three language, you make it to the reception. So that was great fun. So it was interesting to work for a very big American corporate with a team that couldn't be more international. And I really, really loved to discover and party and get to know Paris and the French culture. That was beautiful.
Great. Claruna.
So, Claruna. Yeah, I shared this with Ethan before. I have spent quite some time of my life in different leadership roles in the printing industry, actually, from sales to marketing to HR, even head of production and later on CO. And I have dreamt for quite a long time to become a consultant and a coach, an executive coach for either young people who are on their way to become a leader or for executives who are leaders and who have to handle with different complex problems. And I actually did this in 2018, first in Germany. Then I came to Switzerland. I always thought I would love to live at the coast, and I still love water a lot, but now I'm in love with mountains and lakes and beautiful Switzerland. So I live here since 6 years. Started the adventure with you, Mark, and TSQ, but then we decided to split paths, although we still work on many projects together, but with different focus. So I founded Claruna actually quite recently only, and I'm building this consultation and executive coaching, executive presence, all of these topics inside Claruna. The name came because customers quite often tell me I help them to bring clarity to confused or perceived as confused situations. So I thought the company's name has to have something to do with clarity. So
Really?
this is, yeah.
I don't know. Ethan, you as an American, when you hear the name Claruna, does it automatically for you mean clarity? Do you connect it
No,
with clarity?
I can't say as in English it comes through.
Yeah.
Um, but names. I was Naming is so very difficult to figure out what to name things.
Yes,
Um, so it's at some level you just need something people can remember. I
exactly.
mean, TSQ or Total Swiss Quality is also a name that um, I struggled to figure out exactly what type of quality. I mean, everyone, of course, has a association of Swiss quality, but the North American Association of Swiss Quality goes immediately to watches, and so that's the assumption is, oh, it's
Yeah.
Patek Philippe or something else is the reference, which is not a bad
Yeah.
reference for what you do, but naming.
And to Swiss knives maybe also, yeah.
Yes, of course. One of my first loves of Switzerland. As a young boy, I came to Switzerland and thought, wow, these people love knives. This is so neat.
Yes.
Yes.
Actually, just for the anecdote, the Swiss Quality actually is a short name. The real name and the full name is the Swiss Quality Consulting. So we are a consulting company, and we have the Swiss Quality. We claim that we consult at the Swiss Quality level.
Ah, well, it is a good reference because it is something. It is the most common association with Switzerland is, I think, at least from a U.S. perspective, is meticulous, fine workmanship.
Yes, yes.
Um, I will share, my wife and I, when we travel to Switzerland, we love the city of Lugano because we get the best of Italian food and
Yes,
cuisine
yes,
with Swiss precision around it,
yes,
and
yes.
Absolutely.
it's a fun blend as a result.
It is. And Lugano is indeed beautiful. It's really an amazing city.
Mm-hmm.
Great,
Yeah.
great. Talking about names, I don't know. We haven't really started with the questions I had prepared for today, but frankly, with your background in Amazon, Ethan, what is the common understanding of Amazon? When you say to people Amazon, let's imagine before the company, what would people imagine of Amazon? Do they know that actually it's a forest?
So of course, prior to Amazon's founding, I think if you had said Amazon, people in the United States would first think of the river and the forest.
Yes.
Now the company is so dominant that
Yeah.
ever present in U.S. life that if you say Amazon, people do think of
The company.
The company. And the naming reference, I was not there, of course, so early as when the name was chosen, but the name was after the river more than after the forest. The idea being that it was the biggest river, it carried the most stuff, it was this river of things coming to you, more than it was a reference to the Amazon forest, because of course they both share the same name. But the original logo, if you were to look way back, looks like a river.
Really? I don't remember.
Yeah. Well, it would be late 90s. So 20, 25 years ago when that
Yeah.
logo would have been in use.
I'll have to go and do this. I'll look this up.
Although, speaking of the different names, there is a fun story about Amazon's name. Jeff Bezos wanted the store to be magical. And so his original planned name was Cadabra, short for the magical word abracadabra.
Abracadabra, yeah.
Right. And, but he was talking to someone, I think like the trademark person, and they said, so you want to trademark cadaver, which means dead body.
Wow.
And he said, okay, that's not a good name. And so the way he ended with Amazon is he wanted something that started with the letter A, like very primitive search optimization.
Smart.
When he no longer used Cadabra, he said, okay, we need to be at the top of the list of stores, Amazon.
Yes. Great, great, great. Okay, that's a wonderful introduction. Thank you both. I would like to start with my first question to both of you, and that is, how would you describe the biggest shift in your personal leadership style over the course of your career, and what caused that evolution? Shall we start with the lady?
Absolutely.
I missed the third word, Mark. Could you please repeat
How
your
would you
question?
describe the biggest shift in your personal leadership style, your own personal leadership style over the course of your career?
Yes.
And what caused that change? What caused that evolution?
In my first leadership roles, which were in PR, in marketing, in sales, in international sales, and after sales, I tried to lead by excellence. So I thought I have to know everything at a very, very good level to be able to lead the people in my teams. And then came the situation when, due to an unplanned vacancy, I was offered the job to do head of production. And as I have not at all any engineering or whatsoever background,
Mhm.
this was really something. I thought, well, what will I do there? So excellence doesn't work because I had no clue. All of my colleagues were much better in the topic than I was. And this actually was a great opportunity in retrospective because it helped me really to focus on leading, to focus on bringing a team together, to optimize communication, to be close, to help people grow. And this has affected me since. So this was really a big change, one of the changes.
Right. Great. Ethan?
So it's probably not a flattering story, but I would say my personal leadership style began unkindly focused on arrogance, uh, if you like, more than just simply thinking I knew what to do. I started very young in leadership, right after university, and my approach was I'm smart, I know what we should all do. And so it was very command and control driven, very let me tell you what we should do. Um, Over time, I of course ran into people who didn't agree with me. I argued with them, um, and eventually I got feedback in the form of getting fired twice or laid off, let go, as you're a little too abrasive um, as a leader, and it was correct. So I would say I had two changes in my leadership style. The first one was to stop being such a jerk, realizing that that didn't work, and then later, as I matured further, purposefully studying how to influence. So I would say change one was simply to become more collaborative. And the second change was to purposely focus on influence skills. I was leading a team at Amazon of 800 people. I had an option to take a new job where I would have no reports at all, but I would be responsible for influencing the CEO of an acquired company to be his advisor. And I
Yes.
purposefully took that job to force myself to work only through influence with no direct authority. And that was a plan to build those skills, and it worked. It worked where I had to learn. I can't tell this person to do anything, but I still have ideas I'd like him to adopt. How do I do that?
That
And
is
that's
so interesting. What are those key skills in influencing people, would you say?
um, thank you. One is um, respecting what they're doing and understanding it first. So you probably know the book Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. It says, of course, seek first to understand, then to be
Hmm.
understood. So a lot of it was I was coming into a new business um, that I didn't fully understand. I had to be honestly curious and try to understand what they were doing and why. And then I developed a key phrase I used a lot, which is opposed compared to saying something like, well, let me tell you how we do this in Amazon, or maybe you should consider the Amazon way, or something like that. I learned to say, can I share how I've seen this done elsewhere?
Hmm.
And what I really liked about that, that I think worked, is it's very non-threatening. Can I share how I've seen this done? I'm not telling you to do it. I'm just asking if I can share something I've seen.
Hmm.
And because it's non-threatening, almost no one will say no to that. It would be very rude, essentially, to say no. Actually, I have no interest at all. Um, and then once people agree to listen, there's an interesting psychological thing, which is once you agree to listen, you actually will listen. It's very hard. It's very hard for you to say, "Oh yeah, sure," and what you're thinking is, "Oh no, it's Ethan again. I don't want to listen." You actually listen. And then I had to accept that sometimes they would act on what I shared. Sometimes they wouldn't, but most commonly what they would do is they would consider it and take what was good for them out of it. And I had to be satisfied. Influence doesn't necessarily, of course, mean, this is one of my other early learnings, it doesn't mean I was completely right. It means I was able to contribute to a better outcome. Um, because sometimes, of course, I would share things and they would say, "That's very nice. Here's three here's three differences in our environment," which was fine. I would learn something. So,
Yeah.
and I could go on and on about all the components of influence. Um, they're very fascinating to me because we talk about influence like it's one thing, but it's composed of your track record and your reputation and your personal behavior and your word choice. There's so many things that go into what makes someone influential.
When I work with executives or future executives on this, what we call executive presence, this in the core has to do with influence also, like how to behave, how to speak, what to say, how to connect with people to make this influence. So is there something that you have learned or seen at Amazon that helps creating this executive presence, this gravitas?
Yeah, so you and I work very much in the same field because I'm asked about executive presence all the time. I recently learned a fact I didn't know. You were speaking about names and naming earlier. I didn't know that the word gravitas, a Latin word for how an executive is viewed, how are they taken seriously or not, is actually predates the word gravity.
Yeah.
So Isaac Newton derived the word gravity from gravitas, which I didn't know. And it makes so much sense because gravitas is, of course, your personal gravity. How
Absolutely.
much weight do you bring? How much do you pull other people to you? Um, as for what I like to help executives understand, most people think of, if you ask them what they think of executive uh, presence first, they envision powerful speaking.
Hmm.
And they envision, executive presence is the person at a podium enthralling a room. And that is a component, but I help them understand that a bigger component is their professional accomplishment and ability, because that's the foundation of why people start to listen. And I think it helps people feel better because I work a lot with technical people. They struggle to imagine how they can be great speakers, but they can visualize how they can do great work. And since both of those add together to form your executive presence, it gives them something they feel like, "Oh, okay, I have a chance." So I don't know if I answered your question, because I could talk about this topic all day, but I think helping people understand the role of their ability, as well as the more superficial traits like powerful speaking.
Great, great. This is absolutely an amazing discussion, and thank you both for taking part in this. Bärbel, well, both of you actually, you've managed teams in different parts of the world.
Hmm.
I'd start with Bärbel. What are some universal leadership principles you found to be effective across cultures? And what must be tailored for local contexts?
Hmm. Well, in general, there are some general things I truly believe in, and this might be different for different leadership styles.
Mhm.
But in my personal experience, I always wanted to be accessible for teams. wanted to be open and to be there to discuss and to develop people. I very much liked what you said, Ethan, to understand why people do something and what they actually do, to understand also why they struggle, but not only by lecturing or teaching them, do this, do that, and then you will achieve, but yeah, listen to them. And you see, there is a bit also the coaching approach, maybe. There has been many years ago this approach of servant leadership, and I truly believe in this until today. Be there and help your people to become their best self.
Great, thank you. Ethan, universal leadership principles across cultures?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think all teams want to know the vision. They want to know why they're doing something. So I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek's book, Start with Why. And so I think leading is helping people understand the purpose of their work, because if you don't know the purpose, you can't really make your own decisions about what to do. You can only do what you're asked and hope that it's correct. And when you run into a problem, you sort of have to go ask for guidance. So I think people enjoy knowing the why. And I also think Amazon, at least as an example, was a hub and spoke culture, right? The headquarters was very definitely Seattle. And so for all other offices, helping them feel that they were seen and valued. Everyone wants to be valued. So that's pretty universal. Is again the why, you can help people understand what part they play in a larger whole so that their work feels meaningful. Because um, I think to some degree it's true that different companies still today, and certainly Amazon a few years ago, tended to have a view of, oh, let's send the unimportant work offshore, the repeatable task. And so that can be a little dismissive. And so trying to change that to make it um, more meaningful, I think, is universal.
Great, thank you very much for sharing this. Bärbel, given your work in digital transformation and strategy, how do you advise leaders to balance quick adoption of new tech with a thoughtful, human-centered approach?
Onboard people. Don't come with your own idea and tell them this is the new world and we're going there. Onboard people and listen with big ears and very carefully how they work, what they do, where they struggle. And then it is a lot of change management. Actually, you need to tell people where we go, why we do this, what the steps are, what we already achieved, why it feels bumpy right now because
Yeah.
we left the old, we didn't reach the new. We need to change. We need to figure out this together. Um, I love William Bridges in this with transitions of organizations.
Mhm.
There again, as a leader, you need to bring a very, very clear image of where you want to go, why we do this change, why we do digital transformation in this specific
Yes.
case,
Yes.
and where we stand, what are the next steps, what have we already achieved
Yes.
to keep the energy and the belief to reach there together.
Ethan, very interestingly, when talking about such subjects, talks about helping leaders become true executives. And I would like to hear from you, Ethan, what specific mindset or behavior do you believe separates a true executive from just an average leader?
Yeah. So when I use the word true executive, I'm thinking of someone who's acting at an executive or strategic level, is making strategic decisions, at least for their business unit, if not for the whole company, as opposed to being just sort of an Uber administrator.
Yeah.
You can hold, particularly in the U.S., but I think worldwide, smaller companies give out executive titles as a form of compensation. but someone may not be doing very advanced work.
Yes.
And so when I think about the true executive challenge, it's when you start realizing that you own the strategy and therefore the success or failure of the company. Um, a more basic mindset is, well, I've been given these instructions. As long as I do what I'm told, my responsibility is finished, even if, that is, well, please drive this car off a cliff. Okay, I've driven the car off a cliff. I am successful. That's a more junior mindset than realizing, this is not a good plan. I should turn the car and pick my own direction. That's how I think of the main difference. And I think you mentioned cultural differences.
Yes.
For some cultures, and for many people across all cultures, we're brought up to take orders. We go to school, we go on time, there's a bell that rings or a clock that tells us when to switch. We go to university, there's, a structure of what your degree will look like.
Yes.
There's this very small freedom called electives, where you can choose a couple different classes and say, oh, I wish to learn French as opposed to study art. But other than that, it's all scripted. You then get into your first job. It's usually more prescriptive. Your job is whatever it is, to make this widget. Please press the button and feed the machine. And then somewhere later in your career, often in your 30s, or 40s, you find yourself in a position where there is no answer, and suddenly you realize that what you're doing isn't working, and there's no one to actually tell you how to do it better. So that's when they call the Swiss quality consultant, and you help them. But in addition to that, they have to be willing to make that leap.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for sharing this.
Ethan, do you allow me a question? I'm sorry, I don't want to co-host, but I find this so
It's okay.
interesting.
It's okay. Go ahead.
How does Amazon actually handle this topic of helping to grow leaders, executives? I suppose there's special programs, but what is like expected? What can you do? How can you grow?
Yeah, it's a great question. You're going to find the answer surprising. I left Amazon because I don't think Amazon invests very much in that. Amazon's approach to it is to do half of that job and then allow Darwin to do the rest, which is Amazon communicates what it expects, but provides very little support for people to get those skills. Instead, they expect that the cream will rise to the top, the best leaders will select from the best, but they don't do a lot of the training.
Mm-hmm.
At least during my 15 years there, that's what I found. And to the degree I could find out why the company does that, I did ask, because this seemed inefficient to me, that we were leaving behind people that with a little guidance could be tremendous, but weren't going to figure it out very quickly on their own. I've been told, and we'll call this hearsay or rumor, Jeff Bezos was always able to educate himself. He was always able to figure things out on himself. And so he developed pretty much an attitude, it seems, that great leaders figure it out on their own. And if you need help, you're probably not that good. So a little bit of the great people will figure it out, and we only want the great people anyway. So I can't say, I did try to ask him this a couple times, and I never got an answer. But I can't say for sure that's what he believes, but that's how I understand it. In any case, on an experience viewpoint, since Amazon is so big, you have all of these leaders who wish to grow. They're trying to grow themselves. Some of them bubble to the top. It's very Darwinian. Um, and those that bubble to the top move up. And Amazon's been able to survive on that mechanism, which I guess in that sense is efficient in that they don't invest in If you take a contrast, the American company GE was famous for having a deep, deep executive development process, and would be like the polar opposite, the complete far end perspective.
Great, great, great. Bärbel, I was once at an event in London, and somebody presenting said, in my career, I have created 19 companies. 18 did between okay to very, very well, and one failed. But I promise you, the one that failed has taught me more than the other 18. Talking about setbacks, what's a significant professional setback you faced? And how did it reshape your approach to leadership or strategy?
Yeah, great question. Indeed, in my professional life, there were more than one setbacks, and it is, like many say, a huge, huge source to learn. So what I remember as very painful is when I just joined a company, being part of the management board, and this was a great team. We were fighting, creating, strategizing, dreaming together. But for various reasons, the company was financially in difficulties and had to declare insolvency, like it's in Chapter 11 or something in the US. And this hit me personally so heavily that I remember the day we had to declare insolvency, and then I went home. I had a very shaken sleep, and when I woke up, I saw that my cheeks were full of tears. I was sleeping and crying. So much this hit me personally, and I think it's great to be very motivated and very connected, but I felt that this was far too much. Yeah, that the company crashes and you almost crash with it.
Yeah.
So this was a bit too much. You can be very motivated, very connected, but there's always this question of balance in life. I don't think that we ever have balance. We always look for balance and have things that are too much, too little. But this was definitely too much of identification and ambition for this company.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for sharing this. I know it's not that easy to admit that we failed somewhere, but that's very courageous of you.
I did, and I think most of us do, even those who don't talk about it.
Yes, but it takes some courage to admit it. But thank you very much.
And it takes courage to learn out of it.
Yes.
I mean, it's not in the moment, at least for me, that you see, here this and this happened, and you do your analysis.
Yes.
It takes time to learn. And if I may just add this, I have kind of repeated the same error in a bit different way, but again, going so much into a business, into a job, that cost me a good portion of my health, and I'm still learning. I'm still learning, but after this very painful experience, I hadn't learned, and I kind of repeated this over engagement.
We all are still learning. But once again, really a lot of respect for being so powerful and so courageous and bold to be able to admit this so openly. Ethan, one of the challenges of a lot of companies is that when they scale, especially if they scale quickly, they lose some team cohesion, right? They lose some team structure because they are scaling up very quickly. You've led organizations responsible for massive, massive revenues, way beyond the common, and huge teams of thousands and thousands and thousands of colleagues in different locations. In your experience, what is the key to maintaining a cohesive culture when the business scales quickly?
I'm not sure there is a single key, but I think the two things I experienced at Amazon. First, Amazon has a set of leadership principles, which are cultural underpinnings. Now, almost all companies somewhere have a poster on a wall that talks about values, but it's often just on a wall and ignored. Amazon took 3 steps to make them real. The first is they're a part of every interview. So when we interview someone, we look at the leadership principles and we actually try to evaluate people against the culture. So we're hiring into the culture with the behaviors already. It's not just do you have the technical skill, but do you fit the culture? Second, those same leadership principles are part of every review. So in your review, you not only are getting feedback about the quality of your work or the skill level of your work, but you're also getting feedback about your behavior. And it's again your behavior relative to these standards of the company. And third, they're part of every promotion. And so to move up, before we move someone up to any role, we ask, are they at an appropriate level of maturity? So maturity relative to these behaviors. Now, this leads some people to say, well, Amazon is a type of cult because if you don't conform to the leadership principles, you're not welcome. And there is truth to that, but cult and culture are the same word. And,
Yeah.
and so Amazon is okay with the fact that some great people may not fit the Amazon way, but to have this cohesiveness you ask about, we need to collect people who work in the same style. The second half then was as we scaled, we were careful that the top leader in each new piece of scaling was someone already from this culture so that they could then exemplify it and explain it and teach it.
Yeah.
So when I opened offices around the world, I used, in each case, I relocated leaders from Seattle. I found leaders that were willing to move and could take the culture with them. So, culture is a bit like a tea bag in that sense that one, you put it in the water and it will flavor everything. Um, so that's how we did it. It's of course not perfect. Um, and anything written is subject to interpretation and to differing views. You can't completely write down a culture, even though Amazon has certainly tried. Um, but it's been sufficient that most people who worked at Amazon have some commonality in their approach.
Right.
I believe this is very important for both the company but also the employees who are working there.
Yes.
If you're speaking of, some say this is more cult than culture.
Yes.
This even sounds a bit like opposed from the company.
Yes.
But if you have a job and you find yourself in an environment of culture that does not at all fit to your own values, I think things can become very difficult. I have the pleasure to teach MBA fellows 3 times a year at a college in Munich. And this week is called career coaching. And we focus the whole week, know your own values and figure out what the real values of a company, not those attached on a wall or on the corporate
Yeah.
homepage, but the lived values, the observable behavior of leaders. What is the culture of the company, and in which extent does this fit with your own values? Will you be happy there? Will you be able to fit in, to grow? I think it's important for both.
Absolutely. And when I shared my story earlier about why I think we may have been talking before we began the official podcast, you and I moved on from Amazon exactly because my own value of how to develop people, I realized was different than the Amazon value. And so
Uh-huh.
after a few attempts to see if Amazon was flexible or wanted to change or adapt its value, I I said, okay, this works for Amazon, but it no longer works for me. And I have the opportunity to do something different. And that's another piece of maturity, I think, is recognizing that a company culture may work for that company and not for you. We love Humans love to reduce that to, oh, it's not like me, and since I'm good, that must be bad, as opposed to simply different.
Mhm.
I think it's fascinating. There are cultures that I could never be a part of because they don't fit me, but I see they work extremely well for the people they do fit.
Yeah. Congratulations to this courageous step. This is important, I think, if you see this, to move on.
There is more to congratulate Ethan on.
Yes.
Ethan, with 60 plus issued patents,
Hmm.
let me repeat, 60 plus, you clearly value creativity and innovation. How can leaders in more traditional industries foster an inventor's mindset without a proper formal R&D lab?
So, I would honestly say everyone has an R&D lab available to them, and it's sitting on top of their shoulders, and it's available during all the time you're awake and possibly some of the time you're asleep. So it's open all hours.
I love this.
Um, I don't think any of my patents come from working in a lab, other than the lab inside my head.
Yes,
Uh, you know, we're generally called now knowledge workers. And so while for sure there are people who work in pharmaceuticals or something where they need a true lab as we perceive it, of people in white coats with test tubes, most of us, the lab is a lab of ideas. And interestingly, I think the biggest thing holding most people back from invention is not perceiving of themselves as inventors,
Mhm.
not thinking I could invent, and then also not thinking, um, not spending the time then working to invent. So most of my inventions, first, I have to be clear, when I joined Amazon, I did not think of myself as inventive, but the company requires it. It's one of those leadership principles. It said leaders innovate and simplify.
yes.
And so it's part of what I was judged on. And I'm like, I literally had the big eyes like, uh-oh, I don't do that. Now I'm in trouble. So I had to teach myself to invent. Um, but the second piece of that invention is just spending time believing I could come up with new solutions to problems, thinking about customer problems or technology capabilities and how could they be used. And I've become very inspired about this because some of the most interesting inventions, I collect inventions that are very simple and they're improving on things that are hundreds of years old. So my favorite example that I see this less in Europe, but I assume it must be in some homes. In the U.S., uh, in our shower, we use a curtain.
Yeah.
Now I know in a lot of places I visit in Europe, we use a glass wall,
Yes.
but the curtain has been used in the United States for a long time, and I know it dates back until at least 1880, the first time people built showers with curtains. And during all that time, the bar was straight. And this is a problem of the glass wall in a shower I might experience in some places in Europe. Is it's straight? Well, that for a big person like me, that makes it small. So someone had the smart idea, if we curve the bar that the curtain hangs from, the curtain will be further away up at your head, and it will still be okay down at the bottom where the water needs to drain away
Yes.
because of gravity. This is such a simple change. Oh, we could curve that bar, but that bar was straight for over 100 years. before someone thought, what if I curved it? And so one of the things I share about invention, I can list many similar inventions that are so simple. And I think that we tend to think of invention as you must create amazing new technology. That if it's not an iPhone, if it's not Amazon Web Services, you haven't invented.
Yes.
Uh, Really, invention is just seeing a better way.
Yes.
And the lab on top of your shoulders is perfect for that.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing this. Bärbel, in your executive coaching practice, one of the reasons why sometimes some CEOs call on your help is that they have a lot of blind spots, or at least, let's say, areas of unclarity. And that's actually exactly what you mentioned earlier about claruna and clarity. What is one common blind spot you consistently see in rising executives, and how do you think they can best address it?
It's an interesting and difficult question. I would indeed not call those blind spots, but questions where they do not find the answer.
Mhm.
And indeed, it is, as many say, this is a truth. The higher you go, the more, the less people you have that you can talk to. So if the CEO of a company has a problem, it might already be difficult to talk to his board because the problem might be there, or
Yeah.
to be honest, the questions that are discussed are so various and different. I do not see a common problem uh, with a common solution. By the way, this is the second part of Claruna, unique. So I love to find unique problems and hopefully answers to this. I don't know if you have another experience, Ethan, but I find it difficult to come up with this is the CEO's problem and here is the solution to it.
I think I agree with you. The CEO role is so holistic and so broad. I think there are classes of problems that are probably common: market problems, finance problems, personnel problems. But within that, again, they diverge. The CEO role, of course, is the broadest. Um, you need, uh, while it's important to not try to be an expert in everything, you have to have some awareness, at least, of the concerns so that you can lead people across all sorts of different functions. Um, so yeah, it's. I don't think there is a single unique problem. You are correct. You know, the U.S. way we would phrase the same thing is it's lonely at the top.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and um, I do think if there is a problem that might be common, it's how people deal with that loneliness because it's surprising. Remember, I said again, you begin your career usually being told what to do and told when to show up and told when to go home. And there's always someone to tell you. And then suddenly, particularly at the CEO level, you discover not only is there no one to tell you, but there's also, to Bärbel's point, no one to ask. Uh, no one you can safely ask without appearing weak or vulnerable, or maybe it's your own ego that you can't ask. Uh, so that's a big challenge that I think has a lot to do with humility, to be
Absolutely.
able to ask.
Yeah.
Um,
We talk a lot about decision making. This also for this, normally in all of your positions, you always have someone where you present your ideas and you get approval or not. If you're a CEO, there is no one you ask to. You have to take a decision. Might
yes.
be right or wrong, but you have to take a final decision, which really is not always easy.
Well, because again, our conditioning, and this is stronger in some cultures than others, but our conditioning from birth is about getting high marks, which is about being right. We go through many years of conditioning where there's always a right answer. And then suddenly you're in a situation where you must take a decision, and it's certainly not clear what the right answer is, and there may not even be one. There may be
Mm-hmm.
many, there may be zero.
Absolutely amazing. Guys, we have a question from one of the people watching this, and his or her name is Lassa, and they are asking about your extensive leadership experience from running large scale operations at companies like Amazon to leading and coaching diverse teams. How do you approach diversity, equity, and inclusion in an organization? And what have you found to be the most effective strategies for embedding diversity, equity, and inclusion into everyday leadership practices? Would you like to start, Ethan, maybe from Amazon's perspective?
So I can't help. My first answer to that is today in America, I'm forbidden of talking about this. But well, that's not true. Sad, but not completely true. Um, this topic is incredibly hard because diversity, equity, and inclusion is not something you can solve either quickly or at any one level. Our problems with a diverse workforce begin they begin in the culture. And then and in this case, I don't mean the corporate culture, I mean human culture.
Yeah.
They begin with the fact that the planet's culture doesn't agree on this as a principle. And then that percolates through our schools and our conditioning and what we tell people of different races and different colors and so on. And then by the time you get to a corporation, you are already downstream of so much baggage. You're downstream of people's behavioral baggage. You're downstream of people's cultural baggage. You're downstream of pre selection in education. So now, what do you do as a leader if you want to increase diversity? Um, Part of it, I think, is understanding the experiences of different people. Uh, in the United States, we have a large African American population. And
Yes.
I think one of the things that struck me most, I would like to share with you, or I have two things to share just to give a sense of this problem.
Please do. Please do.
I had an African American woman I was working with who explained to me, well, Ethan, my son is a large boy. He's a teenager and he's already full-size man, but young. And I've had to explain to him that when he encounters a police officer, he needs to be conscious of the idea that to him he looks like a threat.
Oh,
And so um he has to think about his interactions with police in terms of how do I avoid having them kill me. And of course, as a white man, I think of police as there to help me.
of course.
And if they irritate me, someone I may safely yell at, right? I can shake my finger and say, how dare you pull me over? I was only speeding a little bit. Don't you have something else better to do? And I can choose to lecture them as a servant. For him, that would be fatal, or could be, making the same threatening. And what was shocking, now I shouldn't behave that way. That isn't appropriate behavior for me, but people do it. And the contrast that was drawn is culturally, it was shocking to me to realize, wow, I think of police officers as helpful. And this culture has to think of them as maybe helpful, but also maybe dangerous.
Yes.
And I saw how you reacted when I expressed the idea that a police officer might be dangerous. A second example, I mentioned early in our show that my daughter is adopted from China.
Yes.
And of course, she has white parents, and she grew up in white society. And I think the second thing is how blind I was to her experience. So I went and asked her. Her name is Ty, and I said, Ty, how often, she was in high school at the time, secondary school, how often does your being Chinese come up? And she said, oh, Dad, every day.
Every
Okay.
day.
Yeah.
Wow.
And she said, some of it will be very overt racism. People making
Yes.
their eyes, like
Yes.
they're asking her, like, can't you open your eyes all the way, or things like that. Um, we gave her the name Tai, Tai, but it sounds like the country Thailand. So
Yes.
she said people will make jokes like, "What kind of food do you like? It must be Thai food." Um, and are these things incredibly harmful? Honestly, not really. She was so used to them, but they're constant, and that's the harm. And I think to answer I know I've gone on a long time. I think the first step for the person who asked the question is the leader has to be aware,
Yes.
particularly if they are of a group that doesn't have these problems, being aware of how different the experience is for other groups. And then how do you help them? Um, because, I was coaching a different African woman,
Yes.
and I was explaining to her how to lead, and she just looked at me and said, Ethan, I can't lead that way, right? I can't be vocal and direct to other leaders the way you are. It just isn't in me. I've been taught deference and quietness for so long.
Yes.
So um there is no one answer to these problems. We could have a whole other podcast on them. And I'm not an expert, but I think it begins with just gaining awareness of how different these problems are.
Yes.
Um, yeah. So, Verbal, I'm sure you have perspective as well.
It's
Bärbel?
really, really touching, and thank you for sharing those stories. It shouldn't be that way. This is what I personally think, but it is that way. Since very young age, I have been so really interested into culture and different countries and religion and so on, that I personally, I really, really, really do not understand the topic personally, because it's human beings and there is of every color. And a customer of mine used to tell me, la connerie est internationale. So like the how do you translate this, Mark?
Stupidity is international.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, there everywhere there's wonderful people and weird people and aggressive people and inspiring people, whatever religion, culture, color. And so this is
Yeah.
deeply, deeply what I think, what I've always thought, and I found it always very inspiring if you meet someone who is different, because can show you a new part of the world. um, but I'm not naive. I know that the world is not like this. It's just that I deeply regret it also for companies, because there is a Harvard study many years old. They have proven that colored teams, colored in the sense of different people, the more people are different, the better. So those teams are far more successful. This is in terms of character, this is in terms of age, of experience, of gender, of culture, of color, of religion, whatever you want. Just bring people together who are different.
Yeah.
Then learn how to appreciate each other, because yes, someone who is in a character very different from me, it might be difficult for me. It might get on my nerves. Someone who is talking all the time, someone who's never talking. Yes, this is difficult when people are different from me, but it's very, very enriching. To the examples that you had, Ethan, I can add my diversity is to be a woman. And I remember when I was in the beginning of my career, walking upstairs and you find the hand on your back from an executive leader.
Yes.
You're the boss of your boss. You're in your beginning 20s, so how do you react? Or recently, I had a coachee from Indian background, beautiful young woman, and she said, "How do I connect with people when it comes to socializing?" And still today, with me, 50 plus and kind of life experience, if you're in a socializing event, you really need to find your way because men connect much easier around a beer, around a wine, around whatever. They stand together, they have a chat. As women, to get in there, especially if it comes to executives or if it comes to technology, this is still different. This also is part of diversity. And of course, I have to add, as well, as you said, Ethan, when you're white, I'm ashamed of discovering again and again how little problems we have and what other people experience in a day-to-day life. This is shameful. This shouldn't be like this. But this is how our world is today.
I'm curious to ask another executive coach. I take a relatively controversial stand with some people where I think it's fair to discuss how much responsibility does a person of a minority group, whatever type of minority, how much responsibility do they have to try to change things versus how much is it okay for them to choose to try to fit in order to be successful? Because there is a group of people who will say, well, you must always fight the system. And I talk to people and say, well, it's good to try to change the system, but your whole life is going to go by, unfortunately, without this problem being completely removed. So you have to decide, how much do you fight and how much do you adapt? I'm and I think that's a personal choice. But I'm curious, how do when you coach people, how do you balance, if at all, pushing for things to be the way we think they should be versus acting in the reality of how they are?
So first response to this would be, and this will make you laugh, Mark, I usually say pick your fights. You cannot fight them all. Pick your fights wisely.
Yeah.
And when it comes to the executive coaching and the professional context, I encourage people, the question is how you do it. If you look really for fighting and confronting people, which often I can understand, but I think this doesn't serve yourself. So find a way to help people to understand where you're coming from. So if I take this back to women in leadership positions, for example, if you start to be like dramatic or ashamed or like this will not help you. Then you are the lady who gets on the nerves of everybody. If you try to imitate being a man, this will not help you. Don't be more man than men are just to find your stand. Be a lady, be a woman, but be self-confident and tell people with charm but decision that, well, I understand you have a lot of things to say. You interrupted me 3 times. Maybe after you finish, I can exchange my point. Yeah, it's maybe different than starting to cry or to shout. Let me speak. I have a right to speak also. So this is the difficult divided answer I would give to this. For me, it would be very, very maybe idealistic, but important that the bigger group starts to think what they should see and open up and change in order to see and understand minority groups. But again, this is a bit the dreamer or idealistic in me.
Absolutely amazing discussion. Thank you to both of you. It was really absolutely wonderful to have you. Unfortunately, we're short on time and we have to conclude now, but I'll give you both the possibility to say just a final few words. Let's start with Ethan.
Well, I've really enjoyed this discussion. It's been such a pleasure to meet both of you and to have the rich three-way discussion. You know, obviously, if people are interested in finding me, I write every day on LinkedIn. I'm there as Ethan Evans VP, so I welcome anyone who wants to, hear more of what I share. But beyond that, just thank you for the opportunity, and it's been a true pleasure meeting both of you.
Thank you, Ethan. Bärbel?
It's been a true pleasure to get to know you, Ethan, and to talk with both of you. I really, really enjoyed this. Ethan, I hope you and your wife, you will stop in Lucerne next time you come to Switzerland. Claruna and also Swiss Quality is close to Lucerne. Lucerne is super beautiful.
Yes.
And in the center of Switzerland, where you can easily get to everywhere, also Lugano. So I so much enjoyed this exchange, and I hope for your visitors, your people who are watching your podcast, Mark, it was interesting. And I would love to stay in touch and to exchange more with you, Ethan. We should do an international project, why not? With Ethan and with Claruna. So guys, reach out and let's continue this discussion.
Absolutely.
Thank you both.
Do you have a website where people can find actually everything about you, or is it LinkedIn?
It's super easy. It's my name, ethanevans.com.
ethanevans.com. Wow. Okay, and Bärbel?
It's claruna.com.
Claruna.com, as simple as that sounds. Okay, that's great. Thank you very much, both of you. And I really, really appreciate the wonderful discussion. Thank you, especially for having actually taken the initiative to ask each other questions and for feedback. That was absolutely amazing. And I wish you both an excellent evening. Thank you to everybody who has followed this streaming. And I look forward to maybe seeing you in part 2.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ethan. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Bärbel. You both were great. I'm proud of you. This was absolutely amazing. I really love